What would you do if your own family told you not to come home for Thanksgiving just to impress your younger brother's girlfriend? What happens when the most successful person in the family becomes the one they try to hide, and what if, months later, the same brother unknowingly applies for a job at the company you secretly built? This isn't just a story about betrayal, it's about quiet strength, painful rejection, and a woman who stopped asking for permission and made her power undeniable. This is the story of Avery Sullivan, and once you hear what happened in that interview room, you'll never forget it. I was just about to step into a final investor call when the email popped up on my screen, subject Thanksgiving plans. It was from my mother. She rarely wrote emails, which immediately gave me pause. I clicked it open, heart thumping without knowing why. Avery, your father and I have been talking, and we think it might be best if you don't come home this Thanksgiving. Zach is bringing his new girlfriend and her family, and we want everything to go smoothly. Hope you understand, love. Mom, for a full 5 seconds, I forgot how to breathe. Let me back up. My name is Avery Sullivan. I'm 35 years old, and I'm the founder and CEO of Brightbank, a fintech company headquartered in Denver. We've recently been valued at $245 million after a Series C funding round. I'm one of the youngest women in the industry to lead a company of this size, but none of that mattered apparently. Not to my family. Zach's younger brother was bringing Brooke Camden home for Thanksgiving. The name rang a bell. Stanford grad, daughter of Gregory Camden, whose family owns a legacy private banking group on the East Coast. I had met her once. Polished, witty, the kind of person my parents would fall over themselves to impress, and to do that they were uninviting their daughter, their only daughter. The absurdity of it would have been laughable if it hadn't hurt so much. I called my assistant and asked her to reschedule the investor meeting. I wasn't in the right frame of mind to negotiate anything right now. I sat in my office floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the Denver skyline, but all I could see was a memory. Thanksgiving 5 years ago, flying in from a grueling blank business trip, still wearing heels and a wrinkled blazer, only to find out my room had been given to Zach and his then-girlfriend. I slept on the pullout in the basement. My mom had smiled and said, "You don't mind, do you?" Always so flexible. That was the word they used, flexible, code for invisible. The thing is, for years I tried to be the dutiful daughter. I sent birthday cards. I flew in for Mother's Day. I paid for the upgraded kitchen remodel when Dad's retirement hit a rough patch. I offered them stock options in my company. They declined, saying, "It's too risky. We trust Zach's path more." Zach, who had dropped out of 2 different universities. Zach, who had tried being a DJ, a YouTuber, a marketing guru in the span of 3 years. Zach, who always found a soft cushion to land on, usually in the form of my parents' savings. And now Brooke. I reread the email. No apology, no warmth. Just a polite administrative banishment. I forwarded the email to no one. I didn't rant to a friend or tweet about it for sympathy. I just sat. At 5:06 p.m., my mom followed up with a text. "Hope this doesn't upset you. We just want what's best for Zach's future." That was the nail. I didn't respond. I walked home from my office 12 blocks in the November cold because I needed the wind in my face to stop the burning behind my eyes. The next morning I got dressed like nothing happened, hair in a neat bun navy suit. I presented the new product roadmap to our board. I shook hands, I smiled, I pitched, but inside, something had shifted. This wasn't just a family slight, this was a line drawn. They didn't see me as someone to be proud of. They saw me as an obstacle. A threat. A complication. I wasn't just being excluded from Thanksgiving, I was being disinvited from the role of daughter. Growing up in Columbus, Ohio, the house always smelled like cinnamon in the fall. Mom had this way of filling the space with warmth, even if it didn't always extend to me. I wasn't a difficult child, just different. At 7, I was building structures out of Legos while Zach was outside riding bikes. At 9, I got in trouble for correcting my teacher's math. And at 10, I started reading about computer logic in the library during recess. My parents found it quirky until it wasn't cute anymore, until it just made me harder to understand. Zach, meanwhile, was magnetic. He had this effortless charm that made teachers adore him and made my parents beam with pride at every baseball game, talent show, or school assembly. I remember sitting in the bleachers watching them clap for his rendition of a poorly sung Beatles song while I clutched the science trophy I'd just won, alone. They didn't even know I had entered the regional science fair, I used to think. If I worked hard enough, they'd notice. By high school, I was taking AP classes and teaching myself how to code through free online forums. I wasn't invited to prom, but I was accepted early to the University of Michigan, full academic scholarship. I told my mom over dinner one night. She smiled while stirring spaghetti sauce and said, "That's great, honey. Zach's thinking about going to film school in LA. Isn't that exciting?" I laughed politely. I had already learned by then that celebrating too loudly made them uncomfortable. College was a blur of caffeine, part-time jobs, and relentless ambition. I wanted more than just a degree. I wanted to build something that couldn't be ignored. I finished undergrad. In 3 years, worked as a junior developer at a financial software firm in Boston, and then went straight into the Wharton MBA program, funded mostly through scholarships and student loans. When I graduated, I didn't get flowers or congratulatory dinner. Zach got a full-page party invitation when he launched his third failed clothing brand. My parents posted it on Facebook. "So proud of our Zach," it said, "always dreaming big." They never once shared a word about my work. For a while, I told myself it didn't matter. I had created Brightbank out of nothing but insomnia and grit. It started as a budgeting tool for freelancers. Something clean, smart, accessible. Then it evolved, then scaled, then soared. By year 3, we had over 50 employees. I was pitching at conferences in Austin, New York, even London. Investors started noticing, but back home I was still Avery, the independent one. My mom would call me every few months, always starting with "you're probably so busy" and ending with "Zach's trying something new. He's thinking of launching a podcast this time." I learned to play along. I sent gifts for birthdays. I asked about their health. I sent a bonus check when Dad's old SUV finally gave out. He thanked me, then asked if Zach could borrow money to kickstart his digital media agency. I declined. He didn't call for 6 months after that, and now with one email I wasn't just excluded, I was erased. That night I sat in bed, the Denver lights flickering through my window. I kept scrolling through old texts from my mom. Most were about Zach. He's seeing someone new. He might be featured in a local magazine. "Do you think podcasts are still a good idea?" Buried between them was a photo she had sent months earlier. Zach and Brooke smiling under autumn leaves, arms wrapped around each other. Underneath it, she had written, "A power couple in the making." I stared at it until my eyes burned. When did I become invisible? When did I stop being someone to root for? The next morning I found a voicemail from my college roommate Nia. "Hey, Avery, I saw that Brightbank just landed that expansion deal with Vanguard. That's insane. I'm so proud of you. Call me when you can. We miss you." I didn't call her back right away because I knew if I did, I'd cry. And I didn't want to cry. But I did anyway, in the shower with the water turned hot and high to drown it out. Not because of the email, because of what it confirmed. I had never really belonged in my own family. It was a Thursday afternoon, just under a week before Thanksgiving, when the phone rang. I was in the middle of reviewing onboarding protocols for our new compliance hires. Tiffany, my assistant, peeked in and mouthed, "Your mom." I hesitated. Then answered Avery. "Hi, sweetie," my mom said chipper like nothing had happened. "Just wanted to check in. How's Denver this week?" Cold Eye replied flatly. "Well, it's snowing in Columbus too," she laughed nervously, "but the whole town's buzzing. Brooke's family is flying in tonight on their private jet. They're even staying at that boutique hotel downtown." "So classy," I said nothing. "We're thinking of taking them to that new wine bar near the river," she went on. "Zach says Brooke's dad is a big fan of Bordeaux. Isn't that sophisticated?" Still nothing from me. Anyway, she finally slowed. "I just wanted to say, I hope you're doing all right, and that you understand the situation." I couldn't help myself. Do I understand why my own parents disinvited me from Thanksgiving so they could impress my brother's girlfriend's family. Yeah, I think I understand that perfectly. Her breath caught. It's not like that, Avery. No, I said, because from where I'm sitting, it's exactly like that. You've always been so independent, she said, grasping for the word. We never had to worry about you. That's one way to spin it. It's not about choosing sides, isn't it? There was a pause. We're just trying to support Zach, she said, almost pleading now. He finally has a shot at a real future. Brooke's family could open doors for him. He's worked so hard to get here. I bit down on the inside of my cheek. So hard it hurt. He's worked hard, I repeated, incredulous. Of course, she said. He's been networking and he's building his brand, Mom. I employ 200 people. I built a platform that Forbes just listed as one of the top fintech disruptors of the year. I've worked 14-hour days, 7 days a week for the past 6 full years. I paid my way through school, built my own funding rounds, and turned a dorm room idea into a multi-million-dollar company. And you're telling me Zach's the one who's finally doing something impressive? That's not fair. No. What's not fair is being cut out of my own family because I make you uncomfortable. Her voice stiffened. Avery, don't turn this into some kind of victim narrative. That's not helpful, I laughed. Not out of humor but disbelief. You're right, I said. I'm not the victim, I'm just the daughter you ignore. She started to say something, but I ended the call. Not 10 minutes later, my dad called. This time I didn't ignore it. I wanted to hear what he had to say. Avery, he began, his voice always more clipped than Mom's. Your mother tells me you got upset on the phone. Gee, I wonder why. This is not the time to be difficult, he said sternly. We're trying to build relationships here. Zach has a real opportunity with Brooke's family, and you showing up would just complicate things. Complicate how I asked. There was silence on the line, and then he said the quiet part out loud. You always have to make everything about you. The way you dress, the way you talk about your company, the way you correct people. You don't exactly make people feel at ease. My throat went dry. You're embarrassed by me. I said I'm not embarrassed, he replied, but it was too quick. We just want this to go well. Zach deserves a shot at something better. And I don't, I asked, my voice low. You've always done fine, he snapped. You don't need us. You never have. Zach does. I didn't reply, I just hung up. No goodbye, no I love you, and just like that 1,000 invisible cuts over a lifetime suddenly bled all at once. It wasn't just Thanksgiving, it was the Christmas where they left early from my first startup pitch to catch Zach's one-man show. It was the dinner where I brought a girlfriend home and they refused to set an extra place at the table. It was every "you're doing great, but" comment. Every time I downplayed my success just to avoid making Zach feel bad, and I was done. Done twisting myself into silence for their comfort. Done pretending the imbalance wasn't real. Done pretending that this family dynamic wasn't suffocating me. For years, I thought if I just achieved enough, they'd see me. They'd finally treat me like I mattered. But that was the trap, wasn't it? The only thing they ever wanted from me was less. Less ambition, less independence, less visibility. I was never too much. I was only ever too real for them to handle. Thanksgiving morning arrived in Denver, quiet and cold. The city had emptied out. Even the coffee shop on the corner, the one that never closed, had handwritten a sign taped to the glass. Closed for family time. See you Friday. I stood in my kitchen wearing the same sweatshirt from the night before. No makeup, no appetite, no plans. My phone hadn't buzzed once. No missed calls, no texts. No, we changed our mind. I stared at the pre-cooked turkey breast I'd bought out of habit from Whole Foods. It was still in the fridge, unopened. I had planned to warm it up, make a small plate for myself, maybe even light a candle and pretend the day wasn't hollow. But I didn't. I opened a bottle of wine before noon, not because I was celebrating anything, just because. Why not? The television flickered in the background with its usual Thanksgiving programming, marching bands and balloon floats in New York hosted by smiling anchors who gushed about gratitude and family. Muted it after 3 minutes. It felt like someone else's holiday. At 2 p.m., I sat by the window of my high-rise apartment and watched a couple across the street unload pies and coats from their car. The woman balanced a casserole dish, while a little boy ran ahead with a grin so big it made my chest ache. Wondered what it must be like to be expected somewhere. To be welcomed, to be wanted. My phone finally buzzed around 3:15 p.m. A message from Nia. Happy Thanksgiving, Aves. I made your favorite stuffing. We saved you a plate if you change your mind. No pressure, but we love you. I stared at it, fingers hovering over the screen, but I didn't reply. I wasn't ready to face warmth yet. Not when I was still trying to make sense of the cold. Later that afternoon, I poured another glass of wine and curled up on the couch with a blanket that still smelled faintly of my old college dorm vanilla and library dust. And I cried. Not pretty tears. Not cinematic single-drop emotion. I cried the way people do when they realize something permanent has broken. The kind of cry where your shoulders shake and you can't catch your breath, and the sound that leaves your body doesn't even feel like your own. I cried for the 10-year-old girl who got straight A's, but was told, "Don't brag, Zach's still finding his path." I cried for the 22-year-old woman who invited her parents to her first big product demo and watched them leave halfway through to catch a college football game. I cried for every time I thought being good would be enough. But most of all, I cried because I knew deep down they were never going to change. I had held on to the hope that one day my parents would sit me down and say, "We're proud of you, Avery. Not in spite of who you are. Not because you fit our mold, but because you don't." But that day wasn't coming. And maybe it never had been. By evening, the Denver skyline had faded into blue dusk. I turned on a few lights around the apartment just so the space didn't feel quite so hollow. The tree I hadn't decorated yet sat in the corner, bare branches and unopened ornaments stacked beside it. I thought of texting Zach, just to say I hope dinner went well, just to feel like someone in the family still existed in my life. But I didn't. I couldn't, because I realized something else that night, something worse than being unwanted. I was unmissed. They hadn't reached out because they weren't thinking about me. Not at all. And that was what finally broke me. Not the exclusion, not the silence, not the favoritism, but the realization that I could vanish from their table and the night would carry on like I had never been there in the first place. That was the moment I stopped waiting, stopped hoping, stopped trying to twist myself into a shape they might love better. That was the moment I let go, not out of bitterness, but out of sheer survival. And for the first time, truly I understood. Sometimes the loneliest place isn't being alone, it's being forgotten by the people who raised you. The Monday after Thanksgiving, I walked into Bright Bank's headquarters with my head high and a decision made. Enough grieving, enough waiting, enough hoping they'd change. Now it was time to change me. I poured all of the ache, all of the unanswered questions into action. The winter in Denver came in sharp and fast, that year-biting wind-slate gray skies. But I didn't feel cold anymore. I felt precise. Like the fog in my mind had finally cleared, I arrived at the Beeson office earlier than usual, stayed later than I should have. Not out of compulsion, but purpose. Something had broken inside me, but something else had been freed. For the first time in years, I didn't care what Zach was doing, didn't care what my mother thought of my hair, didn't care what my father whispered behind closed doors about my career obsession. I was building something, and it no longer had to earn anyone's approval but my own. In early December, I met with the board and laid out a bold proposal: expansion to the East Coast within 18 months. They blinked, impressed, but hesitant. "That's aggressive," one of them warned. I smiled. So was launching this company in a market already dominated by legacy institutions. They approved it unanimously. Tiffany, my assistant, looked at me as we left the boardroom. "You've been on fire lately." "Just got clarity," I said, adjusting my blazer. Nothing motivates quite like silence. She didn't ask what I meant. She didn't have 2, I also started something personal, something quiet. I set up a scholarship fund under my name for high school girls and Columbus girls who wanted to pursue STEM but didn't have the resources or support. I called it the Ghost Daughter Fund. Not to be petty, to honor the invisible girls, like I had once been. No one knew it was mine. No press release, no LinkedIn post. Just a line item in my personal budget, and a quiet email to a guidance counselor at Westwood High. That single action healed something deeper than I expected. It was the first time I had given to someone else without needing it to be seen, and strangely, that made me feel seen. Christmas came. I didn't go home, wasn't invited. Instead, I spent the day with Nia and her husband and their 2 wild little boys who covered my blazer in chocolate fingerprints and called me Aunt Avery. We played Monopoly and watched Home Alone and ate too much ham and not enough salad. It was messy. Loud, beautiful. Laughed until my stomach hurt. No one asked about my next funding round. No one told me to tone it down. No one compared me to a brother who wasn't in the room. I went home that night with a warm heart and leftovers I didn't even ask for. Started to understand then. Maybe family isn't always the people who share your last name. Maybe it's the ones who open their homes without conditions. Maybe it's the ones who say, "You're enough," and mean it. By New Year's, Brightbank had landed 2 new enterprise accounts and initiated a pilot partnership with a major digital wallet provider. Our stock had doubled in internal valuation. We were being featured in TechCrunch and hiring in 5 new markets. The Denver office buzzed. With momentum, people moved faster when the vision was clear, and my vision, crystal. One night in mid-January, I stood at the window of my office watching the snow swirl like confetti over the city. Tiffany walked in, coat on, keys in hand. "You're still here, just needed a minute," I said, sipping my tea. She hesitated. "Your mom called earlier today, left a voicemail on the general line, said it was urgent." My stomach tightened. I nodded. "Thanks, you can go." After she left, I listened to the message. It was short. "Avery, it's Mom, just call me when you can, please." I didn't call her back that night, not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't sure who I'd be calling. The daughter I used to be desperate for there. Recognition was gone. If we were going to speak again, it would have to be woman to woman, truth to truth, no more shrinking, no more performing, just me, fully, finally. It started with a simple Slack message from Jasmine, our head of talent. "Hey Avery, something odd just came across my desk. You'll want to see this." Attached was a resume. Name Avery Sullivan, position applied for senior communications strategist. For a moment I just stared. Zach. My Zach. Applied to Brightbank. Jasmine followed up with another message. "He applied via LinkedIn. No idea he's related to you. Didn't even recognize your last name. I think he assumed you weren't involved." I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. Of course he didn't recognize it. My public-facing bio used my middle name, Avery C. Sullivan, and most press simply referred to me as Avery C. for branding consistency. Still, the irony. The same brother whose girlfriend's parents warranted my exile from Thanksgiving was now knocking on my company's door for a job. I clicked on the resume. It was embellished, to say the least. He'd listed his current role as director of brand development at a boutique firm I knew had fewer than 6 employees. He claimed experience in strategic finance, which I knew he didn't have, and dropped names of corporate contacts that sounded more like brunch buddies than actual clients. I closed the file. A week ago this might have stung. But not now. Now, it just felt poetic. Jasmine scheduled his interview for Friday at 2:00 p.m. She asked if I wanted to intervene. I didn't. "Treat him like any other applicant," I told her. "If he makes it to the final round, I'll observe. Nothing more." She nodded. He was a bit condescending during screening. Asked if he'd be talking to real decision-makers. Didn't realize Alicia on the call was our director of HR. That sounded like Zach. Friday afternoon arrived. The interview panel sat in conference room 4B, a sleek space with exposed brick, a floor-to-ceiling glass, and a view of the Denver skyline. I took my seat quietly at the back, not as CEO, but as one of 2 executive observers. Jasmine had prepped the panel not to introduce me as anyone of consequence. I was just being there for leadership alignment. The door opened. Zach walked in, all swagger and slick confidence in a too shiny suit and an oversized designer watch. He greeted the panel like he was doing them a favor, didn't even glance at me. The interview began. Alicia opened with a softball. Tell us what draws you to Brightbank. Zach launched into a monologue about disruption, branding, synergy, and leveraging modern voice. He name-dropped a few irrelevant influencers. Quoted, something from a marketing podcast. Jasmine asked him about campaign analytics. He stumbled, tried to pivot to team vibes. Devin, our CTO, asked about cross-functional integration. Zach blinked. I don't really get into the tech stuff, he said with a grin. That's what developers are for. Alicia's pen paused on her notepad. He continued, what matters is the big picture, the story, the relationships. For example, I know Brooke Camden personally. Her dad's company could easily become a client if I'm in-house here. There it was, the entitlement, the assumption that someone else's name could still open doors. And still, he didn't know who was sitting 10 feet from him. Devin raised an eyebrow. We're not really in the market for connections. We're looking for capability. Zach chuckled. That's exactly what I bring. I'm a connector. A pause. Then Jasmine looked toward me. Would our executive observer like to ask any final questions? I stood. Zach finally looked at me and froze. His face twitched. Confusion, recognition, then dread. I smiled politely and extended my hand. Hi, Zach, I said calmly. Nice to see you again. He didn't move. The silence in the room was thick. I'm Avery Sullivan, I said clearly, founder and CEO of Brightbank. Someone at the table gasped. Alicia blinked rapidly. Zach's face went pale. You're the CEO. I am. His mouth opened, then closed. I recused myself from the early stages of this process. I explained to the room to avoid any personal bias, but I do sit in on all senior candidate reviews. So, here. We are. He cleared his throat. I didn't know you worked here. I don't just work here. I said I built here. I opened his resume again. I noticed you listed experience in finance strategy. Could you walk us through a recent campaign where you developed a full funnel model based on CAC and LTV metrics? He blinked. Well, I usually let the finance folks handle that. Of course. And the SEO integration strategies you listed, what platform did you use for KPI tracking? I managed the team. I didn't get into the weeds. Understood, I smiled. And the clients you brought in last year, they were more personal network leads, not formal accounts yet. Thank you. I closed the folder. That's all from me. He looked like he might be sick. Any final words, Zach? Jasmine asked. I just thought he said softly that this could be a good fit. I nodded. We'll follow up, Alicia said, her voice cool. He gathered his papers quickly and left the room without looking back. As the door clicked shut, Devin let out a slow exhale. That was something. Alicia looked at me. You want us to disqualify him now? I shook my head. No, send the usual follow-up, standard decline, no special notes. Jasmine hesitated. Do you want us to explain who you are? I thought about it, then shook my head again. No, let him figure it out. On his own time, I returned to my office, shut the door, and sat down quietly. And only then did I let myself feel it. Not revenge. Not victory. Relief. For once, the power imbalance wasn't tilted against me. He had walked into my world underprepared, overconfident, and oblivious. And this time, he was the one who didn't belong. It was 2 weeks before I heard anything. Then one morning, Tiffany knocked softly on my door. Your parents are here, she said. I looked up from my laptop. Here, she nodded. Reception says they're downstairs. They didn't have an appointment, said it. Was personal. I sat back, took a breath, and closed my laptop. Send them up. A few minutes later, the elevator doors opened, and my parents stepped into my office for the first time in their lives. My father looked stiff in a suit that didn't quite fit anymore. My mother clutched a leather purse with both hands like it was a shield. They both looked smaller than I remembered. Hi, Avery, Mom, said voice tentative. Have a seat, I said calmly, gesturing to the chairs across from me. They sat. There was a pause. Dad cleared his throat. We wanted to talk to you about Zach. I said nothing. He told us what happened. My mom said gently. About the interview. About you being the CEO. I nodded once. We didn't realize, Dad continued. We didn't know you'd built all this. You never asked, I said, not angry, just honest. He looked away. We were wrong, Mom whispered. About so many things, about how we treated you, about what we valued. She paused. And we're sorry. The room felt still. I appreciate that, I said. We were hoping Dad said you might give Zach another chance. Maybe not that position, but something. I looked at them both. I already did, I said. We extended an entry-level offer, if he wants to. Work. He'll work. No shortcuts. My father's face tightened, but he said nothing. My mother looked at me, really looked, and her voice softened. You've done well for yourself, Avery. I smiled faintly. I know. They left not long after. There were no grand promises, no tears. Just a quiet acknowledgement that the dynamic had changed, and that I wasn't going to shrink again to make space for someone else. Zach accepted the entry-level position, showed up late the first week, fumbled his first few tasks, but to his credit, he stayed. He started asking questions, started listening, started showing up early. I didn't see him often, but when I passed him in the hallway, he nodded. I nodded back. No animosity, just reality. We weren't the same people anymore, and maybe we never had been. In March, a small envelope appeared on my desk. It was a handwritten note from my mother, Avery. We still have a long way to go, but thank you, not just for giving your brother a job, but for teaching us quietly what real strength looks like. Love, Mom. I kept the card in my drawer, not as proof, but as a marker, a turning point. Maybe they wouldn't ever fully understand me, but at least now, they saw me, and that was enough. So here's what I've learned. Sometimes the people who should have been your biggest supporters become your deepest wounds. Sometimes the love you crave has to be replaced with respect, even if it comes late. And sometimes healing doesn't look like reconciliation. It looks like boundaries. It looks like telling the truth without anger. It looks like standing tall while others squirm in the presence of who you've become. Would I change what happened? No, because it taught me to stop chasing seats at tables that were never meant for me. It reminded me that success built without applause is still success, and it providence, and for all that I didn't need their permission to become someone powerful, only my own. Now I'll ask you, what would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have offered your brother a second chance? Have you ever had to stand up to your own family to protect your identity, your peace, or your worth? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story made you feel seen even just a little, share it with someone who needs to hear it too. Because sometimes the most heartwarming stories come from the hardest truths. And those stories, they're the ones worth telling.